Hello, everyone. This is Nawal Hamwi from GTG Jeddah. We're having two awesome members as well. Actually, not members only; they're collaborators in this cool event. So we're having Maria Daw from DSC AUB, and we have Ala Al Hariri from GTG and WTM Coast Lebanon. And today we will be talking, actually, not we, Allah, we will be talking about Applied Angular workshop. In the meantime, we want to thank our sponsors, StreamYard, for sponsoring this event. So, yeah, thank you, StreamYard. Allah, the show is all yours. Good luck.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So I'm Ala. I'm going to be sharing my screen now so that we can get started. All right. Okay, so today we're just going to have a small little Angular workshop. It's going to be completely applied. And we are not going to go into a lot of theory. We're going to see everything straight in the code. So my name's Ala Al Hariri. I'm a software developer. I currently do full stack at a company called HedgeGuard. But when I started out my my journey as a developer, I was a front-end developer. And as of now, I've been working with Angular in production for about 3 years. And we are going to get started. So in our previous workshop, we explained what is Angular and what are modules, components, services, and routes. And we covered the creation of a new Angular project, as well as the file structure of a newly created Angular application. So in case you missed that workshop and you would like to brush up on these things, you can watch one of the two links over here. But just to be clear, you don't need to have seen the previous workshop to be able to follow along with this one. So what can you expect from this particular workshop that we're doing right now? Basically, we are going to start with a fresh new project. We're going to understand the modules, components, services, and routes, and we're actually going to create our own. We're also going to understand what lifecycle hooks are and how they work. So to start your Angular project, in case you want to create your own, you need to download NPM and Node.js. You can do so from the following link. Once that is downloaded, you would have to also install and download and install the Angular CLI, which is the command line interface. You would need to do it globally so that you can access it from any directory inside of your computer. So NPM is the Node package manager, and it's going to be downloaded when you download Node. And to create a new project using the Angular CLI, it's as simple as using the Angular command, ng, new, and you name your app. So today what we're going to create is a very small to-do application. And so that's why it is called to-do app. Once you run that command, Angular will ask you if you want to do routing. In this workshop, yes, we are going to use Angular's built-in routing. It will ask you which kind of styling you want. Out of preference, and just my own personal preference, I usually use SCSS just because it's what I'm used to. But it's not necessary to use it. You can use any of the styling methods over here. Once that's done, everything is going to be created. And all you have to do is go to the to-do app directory that's going to be created on your computer and ng serve. Once you do that, you'll be able to, once you serve the application, it's going to be compiled, built, and served on localhost 4200. So let's dive right in. So this is what it looks like for me, because this is an old version of Angular. The newer version of Angular's base application will show a different starting screen. But when you serve the Angular application for the first time, you'll see a very documentation-related starting screen. So let's look at the code. All right, so once you create the application, first of all, I created it on my desktop, but the actual directory will contain the following files. What we're going to do to get started is we're going to go into app, we're going to go src, app, and we're going to go into the app.html. Basically, the app.html is what we see when we open the application over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the code. And what I want to do now is basically I want to display a title for my application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put two curly brackets. These brackets mean that you're interpolating, which means I'm binding this property to something inside of app.component.ts. What that means is that I have a variable over here. The variable's value is to do app. And what I'm saying inside of component.html is I want you to display the value of this variable. So I'm going to save this. Angular is going to detect that I made a change, and it's going to go. We're going to go in here. We're going to check what's going to happen when it refreshes. It's still compiling. All right. So once it compiles, it'll refresh and it'll show us the change in our application. For aesthetic purposes, I'm just going to make this an H1, excuse me, because I want to have it be the title of the application. What I'm going to do now is I want to start creating the component of my application. So what I'm going to do is, because logically speaking, the to-do part, the tasks part of my application are all going to be combined in one logical let's say box, I'm going to put everything inside of a module. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to add a new command line inside of Visual Studio Code, a new terminal, so that I can use a fresh one and keep the application running on the other one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the Angular CLI to create a new module. So I do ngg, which means generate. So I can write it this way as well. And I'm going to say m, which means module. And I can also write it this way. And I'm going to say to do. I'm going to wait for a second. And you'll see that it created something over here. So it created inside of a directory called to do, something called the to do module. Now that I've created the module, essentially the box that's going to contain all of the logic of my application, my to do part of the application, I'm going to create a component that is also going to be within that module. So this time I'm just going to use the shorthand GC for component, and I'm also going to call it to do. We're going to wait for a second, and we will see that there are multiple other files that were created and one file that was updated. So we see just the general Angular files, component, CSS, HTML, everything is there. And when we come here, we will see that the edited part is the to-do component has been imported into the to-do module, excuse me, and it has also been declared. When a component is declared, it means that this module now understands what to display in case this component shows up. This particular module, the to-do module, now knows that if it sees something related to the to-do component, it knows what to display. And inside of the to-do component, we'll see that we just have a very simple HTML skeleton that says to-do works. So let's test this out by putting it into our app .html. So I'm just going to copy this from here to make sure that I don't misspell it. And then we do that. All right. And then we save. I'm going to go back to where it's being served. And it's complete. Now let's go back to our application. We'll see that we don't have anything displayed. Now what I did is I just clicked F12 to open the developer tools. You could also find them in the settings inside of Chrome, more tools. You could go to developer tools and you'll see them. But this is from the older version of Angular. In case you're using a newer version, the same error is going to show up in here. So just because I'm using an older version, we are seeing the error over here. Now what the error is saying is app to do is not a known element. So we did just declare it inside of the to do module, but the app module has no idea what is inside of the to do module. And the reason is we never told app module to get to know the to-do module. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure to import the to-do module into the app module so that it can know everything that is going on inside of that other one, inside of to-do module. So once I save, I'm going to go back, wait for it to refresh, and I'm going to find that the error is still there. Why? Because when we go back to the to-do module, we'll find out that yes, it is declared, but there are no exports. The exports part of the module essentially tells any other module that imports the to-do module which components are accessible. So we need to make to-do component accessible to any other module that imports the to-do module. So once I save this time and I go back here and I wait for it to refresh, I will see that to-do works. So now that we are 100% sure that our to-do component works, I'm going to go back here and I'm going to start actually working on my to-do component. So I'm going to come back here, and the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create a list of tasks. So I'm going to say tasks is equal to an empty list. So this is all well and good, but because we're using TypeScript, and because of that, we have type checking, and we can make sure that the objects inside of this array conform to a particular class, I'm going to create a to-do class. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder inside of the to-do folder, and I'm going to call it models. Inside of models, I'm going to create a new file, and that file is going to be to-do.model.ts. So in here, I'm just going to define a class, a regular class that eventually is going to just be a normal object according to once it's compiled in Chrome, but it makes it so much easier for us to safely create, for example, lists and stuff that conform to a particular class that we need. So export class to do, and I'm gonna need to know if it's completed. So I want that to be a Boolean. Oh, that's not how you type that. And I want to know when it was created. So I'm going to say that's a date. And finally, I also want a description. That's just going to be a regular old string. So I'm going to save that. And then I'm going to come to the to-do component. And instead of just defining it as it is this way, I'm going to say that I want the tasks to be of type to-do, and I want that to be a list. So now I need to import it first. And so now I just have an empty list. But the moment I create a new object, I'm going to be warned that this particular object does not have the properties that I need in my to-do list, in my to-do object, my to-do tasks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start defining two different tasks over here. So let's say I want, let's see, created at new date, just to show today, completed. I'm going to say true for the first one, and I'm going to say description. I'm going to write this is complete by default. All right, got. Okay, so I'm going to then create another one of these. All right. Now I have two. I want the second one to be false, and I want one, and I want to say you can complete this whenever. Oh, I made three. Okay, two. So false, and I want to say this. You can complete this whenever. Okay, so now we have a list of tasks. So first of all, let me check here. All right, so let's first of all decide how we want our task to look like inside of our HTML. So I'm going to create a new div, and inside it, I'm going to put another one because I want to separate the part that's going to describe the status of my to-do, my task, and I want it to show me the date in parentheses, for example, and I want to have the description at the bottom. So I'm going to have the description over here. So let's look at what this is going to look like when it is compiled and in my application. So right now we have status, date, and description. So this is basically what how we expect each task to look like. from within our list. We have the date, the status of the task, and the description. So what I'm going to do, what I can do here is for each element inside of this task, the same way that we interpolated over here, all right, we can come here and we can go, for example, tasks at 0 dot completed. But that would be very inefficient, since anytime we would add a new task, we would have to create a new one, and we can't always predict the number of tasks that are going to be there. So we want a more automatic way of actually listing everything that is inside of our tasks list. This is a great opportunity for us to actually use Angular's directive called ng4. Basically, what ng4 does is you can give it a list, and it will go over every item in the list, creating a new element, a new HTML element inside of the DOM for each item within that list. So in this case, we're going to have this div be replicated as many times as there are elements inside of that list. So for each task of tasks, and now we can use this the same way we used the variable before. So, oh, oops. Okay, so we go here to status, not there. All right. So now what we're going to write is we're going to do task.completed. And then inside of here, instead of date, we're going to replace that with task.created at. And instead of the description, we're going to do task.description. Okay, and then I'm going to save this. See what happens over here. So as you can see now, we have two tasks, one true, one false. One is complete by default, and the other one is prompting you to complete it whenever you want. We have the dates, and everything is present. So, but as you can see, it's not exactly the most readable output that, or the most user-friendly. So let's just make it a little bit better for us as the user. So what I'm going to do first of all is I want to tell Angular that anytime that you see task.completed as true, I want you to write complete. Otherwise, I want you to write incomplete. So what I'm going to use is the ternary or. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say this basically means if task.completed is true, I want you to write complete, else, as this colon, I want you to write incomplete. Right? So basically what this does is it checks, is task completed true? If so, it will give us complete, so the first part of this. Otherwise, else, it will give us incomplete. So that's one way we can improve it. Another thing is the date is a very long date and we don't really need all that information. What we can do is we can use something that Angular also provides for us, which is called a pipe. The pipe is, you can access pipes using this line, and you can actually create your own. But right now, we're going to use one of Angular's out-of-the-box pipes, and that is the date pipe. Essentially, what this is doing is it's taking the value over here. It finds out that there's a pipe. It finds the class that has the date pipe in it, and it runs the date itself into a transform function that transforms it into whatever format that we're going to write right now. So I'm going to say I want to have day, month, and year, and I want it to give me the hour and the minute. Ooh. I want it to give me the hour and the minute as well. So this this date formatting is just the same as wherever you're putting it in. So you just want day, month, year, and hours and minutes. We ran the date into the pipe. So let's save and see what we get. It is recompiling over here. And now we see that it is a little bit more readable. So now we have complete for the complete task, incomplete for the incomplete task, and we have the date presented in a much, much more readable way. And because I feel like making it a little bit prettier, I'm just going to add a line breakdown here. So let's say, okay, so after that, once we have done that, I want to actually give my user the chance to be able to toggle the status of their application, of their task, excuse me. So I want you to be able to make a task complete or incomplete whenever you want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a button that is going to have a function on click. This is an event handler, basically, in Angular. This basically means when you click, Angular is going to detect that click, and it's going to run the function that is going to be defined inside of the quotations here. So I'm not going to write a full function. All I have to write right now is just task.complete, completed, excuse me, is equal to not task dot not equal, no, just equal to not task dot complete. All right, so basically I'm going to say that this is where you can toggle the status. All right, so now on click, what Angular is going to do is it's going to take the task that we have right now, and it's going to flip its, what's it called? It's going to flip the status of it. So if it was complete, it'll make it incomplete and vice versa. So let's save that. And then go back to the application and see the changes that were happening. So now we have the button over here. And now every time I click, I can toggle the status of my application. All right, so let's assume that I don't want to, the moment that I open the application, view the list. Instead, I want to be welcomed into the application first. And after I see a certain welcome message, I go into the actual list. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my other terminal, and I'm going to create a new component inside of the app module, simply because I don't feel like I don't believe that the welcome component needs its own module, since it's a very small component that's not going to be used very often. So NGGC for component again, and I'm going to write welcome. So it's going to be my welcome component. And we're going to create it. All right, so the welcome component now has its own folder with all of its files. And if we go into the app module, we'll find that Angular found the closest module to the component once again, and it declared that component inside of the module. So let's make sure that everything is working as expected. We're just going to take this. We're going to go to the app.html. And we are going to see if our welcome component is working as expected. And it is. So what we're going to do now is I'm just going to change the content of this a little bit. I'm going to say welcome. Because why not? And I'm going to just save it. So now what I need to do is I need to start using the routing between my welcome component and my to-do component. And the way that I do that is I'm going to use a very handy component that is going to be available to me because I have imported the app routing module that Angular prompted me if I wanted to have at the beginning of the creation of the application. So when you say yes, you want routing, you will get this imported by default, and you will get this file also created by default. This file in particular is where you can define all the roots of your application. This is where you can say that for this path, I want this component in this particular variable. So let's go back here. And instead of displaying these two components, we're going to display the router outlet. Okay, so now I have a router outlet, but right now the router outlet has no map to figure out which path belongs to which component. So first of all, I would just want to say that this is technically considered your base path, and anything that comes after that is just any regular path. And if you want to define the base path, you just keep it empty inside of the routes. So this is the first thing that we're going to do, because the first place that we want to go to when the application opens, so on the base path, what I want you to do is go to the component called welcome component. Okay, so, and I also want to have another path but this one is called tasks. Okay, and the component for this one is going to be the to-do component. All right, so now once we save, we go back here, we wait, and now we see that we only see the welcome component. The reason being is we only have one router outlet, and Angular went up into the location. It found out that we don't have a path, and it discovered that inside of its roots, the empty path belongs to the to the welcome component, sorry. So now let's check that our other path is working. So what we can do is we can just check tasks. And we find out that when we put tasks as the path, Angular immediately takes us to the tasks component, because this is what we asked it to do in terms of the mapping of the paths. So let's say now I want, when I go home to, when I go to the welcome screen, as in the home, I want to have a way to route directly to the to-do component. The reason I want to do that is because having to type it at the top of the in the Omnibox at the top, it forces the refresh. So when I type it at the top, it causes a refresh. And that completely defeats the purpose of having a single page application. A single page application essentially works entirely within that single page without needing to consistently load new pages from the server. And having to write that at the top will cause you to do that. So we want to make sure that we're consistently routing within the application. So let's create a link. We are just going to use a normal hyperlink A. And we're going to use another thing that Angular provides for us, which is the router link in this case. And I want this particular link to take me to the \tasks. And I'm going to write down here, go to list. All right. So now that I have that over there, I'm going to save. And then I'm going to go back to the application as always. And instead of being in tasks, I want to be in home. Now I see that I have a go to list link. And when I click it, I'm going to the tasks component. But right now, I do not have a mechanism to go back to the home component. So instead, so now I'm going to create the same thing, but inside of the to-do component. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to go up here. I'm going to put an A as well. I'm going to call it home. We're going to do router link. We're just going to do / over here. I think this is the wrong one. I always forget the right direction of it. Okay, that's the right direction. Okay, so I'm going to do just the /, and I want it to just take me back to the welcome screen. So I'm going to save. Go back here. And we see that it's not actually a link. This usually happens with A tags in case they do not have an href. Href is just the normal link part of the A tag. But in the situation of the welcome component, it looked like it had it. And the reason is the router link actually did that for us. But in this situation, it didn't. The reason being is we do not have the app routing module imported in our to-do module. Yes, it is in the app module, but the to-do component module was never exposed to those components and directives that are provided by the app routing, because it is its own compartmentalized part of the application. So now that we have imported the app routing component, the app routing module, excuse me, it's now a link as we had expected it to be. And without refresh, we can toggle between these two perfectly fine. So now let's say that at the welcome, I want to actually see the number of tasks that I have inside of my list before, without having to route towards the list. But as of right now, the list is only inside of the to-do component, and there is no way for the welcome component to see it. They're in two different modules. Now, this is the perfect part to play for the service. Services are logic, are code that contain logic that are supposed to be used across multiple modules or components in your application. In this situation, this is exactly what we need. So what I'm going to do is, as we were doing before, and this time it's S, to create a service. And because services don't necessarily belong to a particular component, Angular will not create a folder for it like it did for the component and the module. It will just create it in the directory that you specify. So if you don't, it will create it inside of the app. But for me, because I feel like this is the to-do service and it belongs with the to-do module, I'm personally going to just put it in the directory of the to-do. So I'm just going to say inside of the folder to-do, I want you to create a to-do service. So once I do that, it's going to take its time once again. And we will see on the side over here that we have created the to-do service. So I'm going to go here. It's just going to be empty. And now I'm going to take this. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to take out all of the information from here because I still need tasks as I'm still using it inside of the HTML. And now instead of having it in the to-do component, I'm going to have it in the service. But I'm also going to have it private just to keep everything safe. So private to-do, let me import this. All right, so now we have a private tasks list inside of our service. And basically, the service is going to be available for us whenever we inject it into a constructor of a component. And what does that mean? Basically, there's this Angular has something called dependency injection. And essentially what that means is that you don't have to instantiate a service and every single time you need to use it. These services are instantiated and saved somewhere inside of the root, that whenever you request this service, whenever this class is put inside of the constructor of a component, Angular will go check all of the instantiated services that it has, all of the instances of the services that it has. If it already has a to-do service, it's just going to give it to you from the list of all these services that have already been created. So we have the to-do service, and now the function that we need is to get all. So I'm going to write get all. And I want to be very specific on what I'm getting. So essentially, I will say that I'm getting a list of to-dos. And what I'm going to do is return the list.tasks. So I go back in here and we try to use Angular's dependency injection by going private to-do service. And we'll say we need a to-do service. We need to import it as well. So what this does is that as the component is being created, it will find out that there is a to-do service. It will check if to-do service has already been instantiated and there's an instance that's already saved inside of the application. If there is, the to-do service variable that is inside of this component is going to be used as the service that's already available. So now what we need to do is make sure that as soon as this component starts, we get the list of to-dos. There are two ways that we can do that. The first one is we can put it in the constructor, and that's usually not recommended because when it comes to lists and data and all of these things, it's usually the case that it might be an API call, so that could significantly slow down your application. The second way is to use the ng-on-init. So the ng-on-init is basically a function that taps into Angular's lifecycle hooks. What are lifecycle hooks? Basically, every component inside of Angular has a lifecycle. The lifecycle starts out with the component being created and ends with the component being destroyed. So these two events are a part of the lifecycle, and in between there are a bunch of other lifecycle events that are related to any changes in the input, which basically means something like this, but that is defined from outside of the component, or changes in anything that has been bound, so anything over here, like these. So anytime there are changes like that, these are also hooks that are created, that are used by Angular. So basically, you can respond to these kinds of changes or these events in the lifecycle by making your component implement certain interfaces that are provided by Angular, such as the onInit that we have here. We also have one called onChanges, and we have one called onDestroy. So I'm just gonna allow my computer to implement these for me. Nope, that's not what it is. Excuse me. Okay, I made a mistake. Oh, there it is. Okay, so I don't know why this is now different. Okay, I'll fix this. And I'm gonna destroy this one. Okay, so now everything's back to normal. And there we go. We need to import this one and implement this one. Okay, so the mistakes here are just linter issues, formatting, because, okay. So basically, the ng onChanges is the one that runs first, because the ng onChanges detects any input that the component might have. So what that basically means is that sometimes there are components that have something called an input. The input is a part of is a variable inside of the component that is retrieved from the outside. So I'm going to give you an example of what that might look like. We'll fix that as well. So I made a big mistake there. Okay, I don't need this one at all. Okay. So we were talking about the input. So let's assume that we have a component that has an input called name, as the one that I showed you over here. So imagine that we have inside of a random component something like that. So let's write this again. Input, name. All right, something like this. It will be a string. This needs to be imported. Yeah, this just needs to be imported. Okay, so let's go back in here. So we have a random component that has something called input name. So what that would look like is something like that. And this would be one of the important parts for the application to detect. So if we have ng onChanges, it is the first lifecycle hook that will run. And it is the first function that is going to be called when your component is going to be created. So name test is going to be detected and everything is going to start. So when we go back to our to-do component, if we have all of these, the first thing that is going to run is ng onChanges. Then after that, it's going to be ng onInit. So if your ng onInit uses any of these at input variables, they would have been handled by the ng onChanges. And then onInit means the component is about to get drawn into the HTML. And right before it does that, or as it's doing that, the function ng onInit functions. The function ng onInit is called. And the last thing before the component is being destroyed, as in, for example, when we go from welcome to to-do, the welcome component is being destroyed. It's being removed from inside of the DOMs to make space for the to-do component. And that is where the ng onDestroy would run. So in between these, you have things that are related to the content, which means in case you have a part of your application that is not a part of your application that is loaded within your component, so you have a component within your component, so that would cause that would trigger events that are related to content, such as content init or content checked. And there's another event that is related to the HTML part being drawn, and those are view init and view checked. So For today's purposes, we are only going to need to use the ng on init. So once the application starts, what I want to do is once this component is being drawn, I want to fill the variable in my component called tasks. So tasks, I want it to be the to-do service dot get all. All right, so now that I have that, if I save, I go back here and I go to my list, I will see that it's refreshing still. I will see that my list is still functioning as expected. So now that I have the service and I would like to have the count of my tasks before I go in, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable over here called number of tasks. Okay, and I'm going to start it out at being 0. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to also inject the to-do service here. So now within the entire application, the to-do service, the same to-do service is going to be used here, and it is going to be used in our to-do component. So on the init, what I want to do is this dot number of tasks is going to be equal to the to-do service get all dot length. And I'm going to take this and I'm just going to put it in here, and I'm going to tell myself that I have this many tasks in your list. So I'm just going to save. It's compiling. And we can go back here and go home. And we'll see that it is now telling me that I have 2 tasks in my list. And if I go back and forth, this is what I have. So now what I want to do as well is I want to give myself the ability to add tasks, because what's the point of a task app if I can't do that? So I'm going to go back here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create yet another button down here. And in that button, I'm going to also ask it to run a function when I click on it. So in this case, what I wanted to do is I wanted to add task. So this particular function is not defined yet. What it'll do is it will try to go over here, look for add task. It won't find it and will cause an error. But we're going to preempt that, and we're going to actually write this task, this function. So what we would need is to add a new to-do inside of the list that is inside of our to-do service. But we cannot do it directly into the get all, especially since we made that list private. So what we can do is inside of the to-do service, we can add a new function, and it will be called create to-do or task or whatever, and it is going to be a to-do. It's going to be void, so not writing the return type is equivalent to writing this. So just to keep it a little bit cleaner, what we're going to do is this dot tasks dot push, and we're going to push our new to do. So this is basically what it's going to look like. We're going to save it, and it's still going to be a little bit upset about this. So what we have now is when I click the button, I want to call the service, and that service is going to push a new task into my task list. So this dot, okay, to do service dot create, and we're going to create a new, or we don't need to create a new, we could just create this, but it's not going to be very happy about it because I specified that the parameter type in create is in fact to do. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to write created at. I'm going to write new date. So right now, whenever it's created, I'm going to completed false. And the last thing is description. I'm just going to write a normal description, something else, like something random, like new task. And I am going to save. So now I have a button which has no words. So I'm going to write add task over here, save. And then I'm going to go in here. I'm going to see that I have add task. So now if I add a new task, I will see the new task being added. And if I go home, I will see that the number of tasks that I have has increased. So now, of course, I want to customize the kind of tasks, the description of the task that I want. I don't want every task that's coming up to be a new task. I want to customize it. So what I can do is I would have to create a text box, normal input, and I want it to be of type just text. And usually it's difficult to actually continuously detect changes inside of your inputs and inside of text boxes. So what we're going to do is we're going to use another thing that Angular provides out of the box, and that is form controls. So basically what this does is it binds a property to inside of your component.ts to whatever the input of the user is going to be. And we need to import something for that. And that module is called the reactive forms module, which I will now import manually. So I'm going to take this. I'm going to write forms. So now I've imported the reactive forms module, and I can use the form control. So I'm going to go back in here, and I'm going to say that form control for this notation is for the inputs of, for example, directive or component. So we are going to say it's going to be new description. I'm going to take that. I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to put it up here. So new description equal new form control, and I want it to be empty at first. I need to import that, and instead of having new task down here, I'm going to write what's called this, and it's a form control, so we just need to take the value of that, and we're going to save. And we will go back to our application. So we're back to two tasks because there was a refresh, and the service itself is only saved for the lifetime of the application. And when you're refreshing, you're restarting the lifetime. So that's why it just goes back to two and it doesn't get saved. So right now we're going to go back to our list. We now have our input, our text box, and I'm going to say I have a new task. And I'm going to add it. And now I can edit it however I want. And I can add, again, as many as I want. And that is going to be our whole application for today. So I'm going to come back here. And I'm going to open up the floor for any questions if anyone has questions. I'm going to read the chat if there is. Can you please show us todo.module.ts and app.module.ts again? Sure. Also, just so you know, the application is available on my GitHub. So we will share that with you after the presentation. So this is the to-do module.ts. Are those similar to the hooks found on React? I'm not 100% sure since I haven't really developed with React, but since most frameworks are very similar, I would assume that they would be a little they would be very similar as well. Okay, so let me. All right. So I think if nobody has any more questions.
Thank you so much, Ala. It was great.
Thank you.
We can wait for like 1 minute in case anyone has a question. and then definitely we can wrap it up. Half a minute. Any questions? Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Ala. Thank you, DSC AUB and GDG and WTM Coast Lebanon. شكرا كثير للحضور الكريم و stay tuned for more awesome events. Bye.
Thank you.